I'm Douglas Mason, CEO of Naturally Splendid, symbol NSP on the TSX Venture Exchange. Naturally Splendid is a biotechnology and consumer products company focused on the global cannabis and health markets. Naturally Splendid is expanding distribution in this rapidly growing market with products currently in Canada, the USA, South Korea, Germany, and Australia. To view our comprehensive company presentation and for more information, please visit our website at naturallysplendid.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Harvey Oberfeld, a retired but still issue-engaged television reporter. You can read his blog, Keeping It Real, on harveyoberfeld.ca. Harvey, welcome back to the show.
Good to be back.
Harvey, the BC government declared a surplus. Is this an honest figure? And if it is honest, what should they be doing with that money?
I almost laughed when you said the BC government, because of course you could say every BC government, any BC government, they all do that. And then it's left to us to figure out whether it's honest or not. I can only go by what the Auditor General says. I mean, I have enough trouble balancing my own bank book. But Carol James reported a surplus this year of just over $1 billion. And, I mean, the minister wouldn't lie to us. But then the Auditor General, Carol Bellringer, took a look at it and said, wait a minute, the actual surplus is not 1.5 as Carol James had said, it's 7.2 billion. Now, and I'll quote you what Bellringer said. She said, what we're saying is that the financial health of the province is actually better than reported, and that the accumulation of the surplus is quite significant. So the government of BC has been taking it in hand over fist. I mean, they're just raking in the dough. And you wonder, well, where's this coming from? Well, have you looked at your deductions on your last paycheck? We have been overtaxed. We have been overcharged for ICBC. We have been overcharged for hydro. We've been overcharged for ferries. We've been overcharged for gasoline. And the proof is in the pudding. And if you don't believe me, well, you can listen to what the Globe and Mail said, looking at Carol James's own figures. They said that the reason for the tax surplus is, I'll read you the exact quote. The higher than expected surplus is primarily the result of a $2.9 billion in increased revenue, largely driven by higher personal and corporate income taxes and new taxes, including the speculation tax and employer health tax. It's all taxes, just taking it from us wherever they can, whenever they can. And so the NDP, they're no better than any other provincial government has been. They're just cashing in and making us pay when we don't really have to pay. Because, I'll tell you, Jim, when governments report surpluses, that means they're taking too much. This is not a profit-driven operation, or it's not supposed to be. They are supposed to come to us to fund necessary taxes and services. Instead, what governments have been doing is they all do it. For the first 2 years of their terms, they overtax us. They basically try to strangle us for money. And then in the last 2 years, now they've got all this surplus so they can hand out goodies pre-election. And the NDP are doing just what the Liberals did. And what I find particularly amusing is, where are all the NDP supporters now that ranted and raved when the Liberals did it? Where are they now? They're being very, very quiet.
Well, if they're going to run the province like a company and have a surplus or a profit, shouldn't we get a dividend as the primary shareholders in this organization?
Well, the first thing they should do is pay down the debt. I mean, how about what's BC's the Canadian debt is what, 600 billion or something like that. Now it's nothing like the American debt, which is 22 trillion, but still, when governments have debt, when we owe money, You would think if they're going to have first of all, I don't believe they should have a surplus, not a huge surplus. If they run things judiciously, they cut back on waste, which they seldom do. But if they did do that, or revenues were just greater in a particular sector than they estimated, then you either use that money to give the taxpayers a break next year, or pay down the debt, so that we don't owe so much in future generations, because eventually that will catch up to us. However, what governments tend to do is they purposely, in my view, overtax us, take revenue from us, so that they can offer us, buy our votes in the next election by, saying and making announcements, we're going to use this money to give you a break, we're going to use this money to improve new services, or improve old services, or give you new services. And time after time, the voters buy it. The voters fall for it and say, oh, I'm getting something free. Of course, it's not free, because as soon as they get in next time, they're going to raise more taxes than that, because they're going to have to pay for the new promises they made on an ongoing basis, and they're going to have to raise money to make their next group of promises 4 years later.
We'll have more with Harvey Oberfeld right after the break.
Cypress Development Corp. is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp. trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Harvey Oberfeld. Harvey, if they're running in reality a surplus of over $7 billion, couldn't they up the personal exemption on provincial income tax? Because I remember asking Ujjal Dosanjh when he was Premier of BC, why don't you up it from, I think it was $8,000 a year income before you were taxed, to what they do in Alberta, where it's $25,000. And he said, but Jim, that would cost the provincial treasury $3 billion. I said, sir, so you admit the government is running on the backs of the working poor.
Well, they could do it. They could raise that. They could do all kinds of things and share the wealth. That's basically what it is. But as I said, they don't, and they're not. The NDP is no different. The Liberals, and I'm glad to say that I did the almost identical blog in September 2016 when the Liberals were predicting, get this, a $1.9 billion surplus, also just before the election. So this is the formula. This is how it works. This is how they all do it. The only thing that's changed is now it's the Liberals who are going, harumph, 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 how could you have done this to the taxpayers? Whereas last time it was the NDP who were going, harumph, 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 how could you have done that to the taxpayers? The only thing that really disappoints me is not the reaction of the politicians. It's the reaction of the media. This was all reported just recently with all the excitement of a weather forecast. The media, if I were still working, I would have gone after, as I often did in the past, I would have gone after the minister, I would have gone after the MLAs, and I would have interviewed people on the street. What do you think of this money being ripped out of your wallets for no necessary reason, to the point that they actually have a surplus and a profit now? What do you think about that? And why aren't they asking the minister or the premier these tough questions about, why have you done this? What kind of incompetence do you have in your finance department that year after year, when you have these surpluses, And you could ask, could have asked the same thing of the Liberals too. That's the problem. The media, they just report it and then they move on to the next thing or the next story, which is usually some other press release that's come out. This warrants much more investigation. It really warrants much more light being shone on it by the media because every time there's a deficit, every time there's a surplus, every time there's an increase in the debt by government program spending, that's not good for our future, and eventually it will catch up to us. And yet you don't see anybody asking any questions other than, what do you think we might get in the form of goodies next time around? Well, that's not the way we should be governed, and that's not the way taxpayers' money should be spent. And I don't see it on TV. I'm reading the newspapers. They talk about it briefly and then they move on. Well, they shouldn't move on. They should stay on this and ask, why don't we give us a tax break next year? And you mentioned, the middle income people or lower income people. Well, what about seniors? You take seniors. How many seniors pay taxes for 50 years and then retired on either no pensions, crappy pensions, or pensions without COLA? And they have been facing increases every single year in taxes, municipal taxes, provincial taxes, gasoline taxes, cable, hydro, natural gas, everything you can imagine. And a lot of them are struggling just to make ends meet from one monthly end paycheck or retirement check to the next. What about giving them a special category that maybe after you've paid taxes for 50 years, maybe you should have a break on your income tax. Give it a special old age pension reduction of an extra $15,000 of exemption, let's say, and let the rich people who are still working, making big salaries, well, they could probably use the existing exemption levels because they're cashing in. But what about working people? What about people who don't make, that much? Give them an extra break. You don't have to give it to everybody, but they don't give it to anybody other than the people who they identify as their voting base. I mean, they'll try to reward them, usually with kind of gifts and goodies, but they don't really give it back to the people who really paid into it.
Well, Harvey, somebody asked me once, if minimum wage is so good, how come politicians don't pay themselves minimum wage?
Well, I would not ask them that. I would not tell them, I'm not even expecting that politicians, I've seen them at work. I've seen the hours they work and all that. And, I just wish they'd give us all a pension the way they give themselves pensions. I wouldn't ask them to work for the minimum wage, but I'd sure ask them to work for the same pensions they, seem to feel we can get along on. I bet they wouldn't be willing to live on a senior's pension with OAS or guaranteed income supplement. So, that's not going to work as far as asking them to work for less. But they have all this money. They shouldn't have collected all this extra money. And the least they could do is lower our taxes in the next year to give it back to us. But of course they won't, because that doesn't buy votes. They want to use our money to buy our votes. And that'll happen in the next year and a half.
We'll have more with Harvey Oberfeld right after this.
Grand Portage Resources' Herbert Gold Project in southeast Alaska highlights increased gold resource, indicated and inferred, of 860,000 ounces, in excess of 10 grams per ton gold. Expansion drilling is planned on the Herbert Gold property for the summer of 2019. Grand Portage Resources trading symbols are GPG on the TSX Venture, GPTRF on the OTCQB, and GPB on Frankfurt. For more information, please visit our website, grandportage.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Harvey Oberfeld. Harvey, BC Finance Minister Carol James was smiling when she announced that thanks to all the extra taxes they have put on homes, a foreign buyer tax, a second home tax, a speculation tax, a school tax, that BC home prices have fallen radically. What you didn't mention is that you've also lost hundreds of millions in BC home equity, and a lot of people were counting on that for their retirement. Since when have you seen a politician bragging about people losing tens of thousands of dollars in their homes.
Well, I guess she figures this plays to their constituency. I mean, buying a home, I commented on this in one of the people that responded on my blog to this topic that's up there now. And I was thinking about, they said, well, all the people that work so hard today, it's hard to get ahead. And it occurred to me, we live in a supposedly very progressive society now. People are better educated. People are making huge salaries compared to what, let's say, was made in the 50s and the 60s when my parents were working. But at the same time, my parents, who weren't that well educated, we owned a home, we had a car, my mother was able to stay home and take care of the kids. We went up to the Laurentians for summer cottage rental in the summer, or down to Plattsburgh, New York. And then when the kids left home, my parents were able to sell the house and have nice winters in Florida. Take a look at working people today. How few mothers can stay home and just take care of the kids. You've got two parents working. Supposedly we've advanced technologically. Supposedly we're better educated. Supposedly everything is much more efficient. But look at how it takes two parents just to struggle just to keep their heads above water. So when things are supposed to have been improved, clearly they are not. We lived a better quality life around the middle class in the 50s and the 60s than they do now. And they don't have to live, 3 or 4 single people to an apartment. Even that didn't exist back then. So, this money that's being taken, and people say, well, who do you blame? Well, part of the problem is that the government is just taxing everything we can at every level we can, and that's civic government, provincial government, regional government, federal government, and not to mention their agencies, all the agencies they have, and all the taxes they impose, the HST, the GST. So what's happened is the government is taking, indirectly and directly, much more of a larger portion out of our pockets. And there's no greater example of that than the $1.5 billion or $7 billion surplus, depending who you want to believe, that the NDP has just run up in the last year, or the $1.9 billion that the Liberals ran up in the surplus that they ran up in their last year in office. I mean, this is a consistent piece of information that comes out every year with every government, regardless of the political stripe, and the taxpayers have got to start standing up and speaking up about it, and the only way they can do that is through the media, if the media take up the cause instead of trying to rush to the next fire down the street and doing stories on things that most of us couldn't care less about and pay little attention to.
One of my beefs with politicians is how many of them run off on these foreign junkets off to Brisbane, Australia, or Hong Kong, and they say, well, I went to this transportation thing, or how to improve the ecological impact of your city. I said, well, okay, you went to this conference. What did you learn there, and what are you going to implement here? They never have an answer.
Well, they're going to have to study it. They may have to do some more travel, and if history holds true, of course, you must travel to warm climates in the winter and cooler climates in the summer. When I was in Ottawa, I'm still smarting from, the Governor General at the time, Jean Sauvé. She wasn't very happy with me when I did a story about her having to visit on an official government jet, of course, somewhere in the Caribbean in the middle of February to study something. It was a Commonwealth meeting of some sort, and I asked how could she do that? What a waste of money with the entourage she took. She was not very happy. Her officials were not happy with me, and I guess they sort of monitored my story, and they were particularly unhappy when under it we ran the music, Girl from Ipanema. Politicians do that. I mean, they have a way of finding the right conferences to go to at the right times. Whether anything comes out of it, well, people, they will say yes, it was very valuable knowledge, but, they just figure it's part of the cost of being in government that we pay and they enjoy.
Well, when Gregor Robertson was mayor of Vancouver, over his term, I calculated he spent about a year of that somewhere else other than Vancouver.
A lot of his opponents would wish he'd spent more. out of Vancouver. But I mean, they all do it. I wouldn't nail it down to one politician. I mean, a lot of them find ways of doing it, and the conference organizers know this. You know, you're not going to organize a conference in, let's say, in Quebec City in the middle of March. I mean, not too many people are going to show up. I mean, especially if it's not even during Carnival. So, I mean, they organize these conferences where they expect there will be a lot of interest in coming on their expenses. Where it gets dicey is when they start bringing their spouses and things like that. But that goes on all the time. But you know, all the governments do it. I just think the bigger issue is when they collect our taxes. They can't keep adding on more and more taxes to us and wonder, you know, why isn't the economy doing as well as it can? Why can't people, you know, pay their bills? Because there's no money circulating. The government has taken too much of it for themselves. Harvey,
always fun chatting with you.
Welcome.
My guest has been Harvey Oberfeld. Check out his blog, Keeping It Real, on harveyoberfeld.ca. If you have any questions for Harvey or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@housestreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.